How to Live on 24 Hours a Day by Arnold Bennett. Chapter 4. The Cause of the Troubles. In order to come to grips at once with the question of time expenditure in all its actuality, I must choose an individual case for examination. I can only deal with one case, and that case cannot be the average case, because there is no such case as the average case, just as there is no such man as the average man. Every man and every man's case is special. But if I take the case of a Londoner who works in an office, whose office hours are from 10 to 6, and who spends 50 minutes morning and night in traveling between his house door and his office door, I shall have got as near to the average as facts permit. There are men who have to work longer for a living, but there are others who do not have to work so long. Fortunately, the financial side of existence does not interest us here. For our present purpose, the clerk at £1 a week is exactly as well off as the millionaire in Carlton House Terrace. Now, the great and profound mistake which my typical man makes in regard to his day is a mistake of general attitude, a mistake which vitiates and weakens 2/3 of his energies and interess. In the majority of instances, he does not precisely feel a passion for his business. At best, he does not dislike it. He begins his business functions with reluctance, as late as he can, and he ends them with joy as early as he can. And his engines, while he is engaged in his business, are seldom at their full HP. I know that I shall be accused by angry readers of traducing the city worker, but I am pretty thoroughly acquainted with the city, and I stick to what I say. Yet in spite of all this, he persists in looking upon those hours from 10 to 6 as the day, to which the 10 hours preceding them and the 6 hours following them are nothing but a prologue and epilogue. Such an attitude, unconscious though it be, of course kills his interest in the odd 16 hours, with the result that, even if he does not waste them, he does not count them. He regards them simply as margin. This general attitude is utterly illogical and unhealthy, since it formally gives the central prominence to a patch of time and a bunch of activities which the man's one idea is to get through and have done with. If a man makes 2/3 of his existence subservient to 1/3, for which admittedly he has no absolute feverish zest, how can he hope to live fully and completely? He cannot. If my typical man wishes to live fully and completely, he must, in his mind, arrange a day within a day. And this inner day, a Chinese box in a larger Chinese box, must begin at 6 p.m. and end at 10 a.m. It is a day of 16 hours. And during all these 16 hours, he has nothing whatever to do but cultivate his body and his soul and his fellow men. During those 16 hours, he is free. He is not a wage earner. He is not preoccupied with monetary cares. He is just as good as a man with a private income. This must be his attitude. And his attitude is all important. His success in life, much more important than the amount of estate upon what his executors will have to pay estate duty, depends on it. What? You say that full energy given to those 16 hours will lessen the value of the business 8? Not so. On the contrary, it will assuredly increase the value of the business 8. One of the chief things which my typical man has to learn is that the mental faculties are capable of a continuous hard activity. They do not tire like an arm or a leg. All they want is change, not rest, except in sleep. I shall now examine the typical man's current method of employing the 16 hours that are entirely his, beginning with his uprising. I will merely indicate things which he does and which I think he ought not to do, postponing my suggestions for planting the times which I shall have cleared, as a settler clears spaces in a forest. In justice to him, I must say that he wastes very little time before he leaves the house in the morning at 9:10. In too many houses he gets up at 9, breakfasts between 9:7 and 9:30, and then bolts. But immediately he bangs the front door, his mental faculties, which are tireless, become idle. He walks to the station in a condition of mental coma. Arrived there, he usually has to wait for the train. On hundreds of suburban stations every morning you see men calmly strolling up and down platforms while railway companies unblushingly rob them of time, which is more than money. Hundreds of thousands of hours are thus lost every day simply because my typical man thinks so little of time that it has never occurred to him to take quite easy precautions against the risk of its loss. He has a solid coin of time to spend every day, call it a sovereign. He must get change for it, and in getting change he is content to lose heavily. Supposing that in selling him a ticket the company said, "We will charge you a sovereign, but we will charge you 3 halfpence for doing so." What would my typical man exclaim? Yes, that is the equivalent of what the company does when it robs him of 5 minutes twice a day. You say I am dealing with minutiae. I am. And later on I will justify myself. Now, will you kindly buy your paper and step into the train? End of chapter 4. How to Live on 24 Hours a Day by Arnold Bennett. Chapter 5. Tennis and the Immortal Soul. You get into the morning train with your newspaper, and you calmly and majestically give yourself up to your newspaper. You do not hurry. You know you have at least half an hour of security in front of you. As your glance lingers idly on the advertisements of shipping and of songs on the outer pages, your air is the air of a leisured man, wealthy in time, of a man from some planet where there are 124 hours a day instead of 24. I am an impassioned reader of newspapers. I read 5 English and 2 French dailies, and the news agents alone know how many weeklies regularly. I am obliged to mention this personal fact, lest I should be accused of a prejudice against newspapers, when I say that I object to the reading of newspapers in the morning train. Newspapers are produced with rapidity, to be read with rapidity. There is no place in my daily program for newspapers. I read them as I may in odd moments, but I do read them. The idea of devoting to them 30 or 40 consecutive minutes of wonderful solitude, for nowhere can one more perfectly immerse oneself in oneself than in a compartment full of silent, withdrawn, smoking males, is to me repugnant. I cannot possibly allow you to scatter priceless pearls of time with such oriental lavishness. You are not a Shah of time. Let me respectfully remind you that you have no more time than I have. No newspaper reading in trains. I have already put by about 3/4 of an hour for use. Now you reach your office, and I abandon you there till 6 o'clock. I am aware that you have nominally an hour, often in reality an hour and a half, in the midst of the day, less than half of which time is given to eating, but I will leave you all that to spend as you choose. You may read your newspapers then. I meet you again as you emerge from your office. You are pale and tired. At any rate, your wife says you are pale, and you give her to understand that you are tired. During the journey home you have been gradually working up the tired feeling. The tired feeling hangs heavy over the mighty suburbs of London, like a virtuous and melancholy cloud, particularly in winter. You don't eat immediately on your arrival home, but in about an hour or so you feel as if you could sit up and take a little nourishment. And you do. Then you smoke, seriously. You see friends. You potter. You play cards. You flirt with a book. You note that old age is creeping on. You take a stroll. You caress the piano. By Jove, 11:15. You then devote quite 40 minutes to thinking about going to bed. And it is conceivable that you are acquainted with a genuinely good whiskey. At last you go to bed, exhausted by the day's work. 6 hours, probably more, have gone since you left the office. Gone like a dream, gone like magic, unaccountably gone. That is a fair sample case. But you say, it's all very well for you to talk. A man is tired. A man must see his friends. He can't always be on the stretch. Just so. But when you arrange to go to the theater, especially with a pretty woman, what happens? You rush to the suburbs. You spare no toil to make yourself glorious in fine raiment. You rush back to town in another train. You keep yourself on the stretch for 4 hours, if not 5. You take her home. You take yourself home. You don't spend 3/4 of an hour in thinking about going to bed. You go. Friends and fatigue have equally been forgotten, and the evening has seemed so exquisitely long, or perhaps too short. And do you remember that time when you were persuaded to sing in the chorus of the Amateur Operatic Society, and slaved 2 hours every other night for 3 months? Can you deny that when you have something definite to look forward to at evening tide, something that is to employ all your energy, the thought of that something gives a glow and a more intense vitality to the whole day? What I suggest is that at 6 o'clock you look facts in the face and admit that you are not tired, because you are not, you know, and that you arrange your evening so that it is not cut in the middle by a meal. By so doing, you will have a clear expanse of at least 3 hours. I do not suggest that you should employ 3 hours every night of your life in using up your mental energy. But I do suggest that you might, for a commencement, employ an hour and a half every other evening in some important and consecutive cultivation of the mind. You will still be left with 3 evenings for friends, bridge, tennis, domestic scenes, odd reading, pipes, gardening, pottering, and prize competitions. You will still have the terrific wealth of 45 hours between 2 p.m. Saturday and 10 a.m. Monday. If you persevere, you will soon want to pass 4 evenings and perhaps 5 in some sustained endeavor to be genuinely alive. And you will fall out of that habit of muttering to yourself at 11:15 p.m., time to be thinking about going to bed. The man who begins to go to bed 40 minutes before he opens his bedroom door is bored. That is to say, he is not living. But remember, at the start, those 90 nocturnal minutes thrice a week must be the most important minutes in the 10,080. They must be sacred, quite as sacred as a dramatic rehearsal or a tennis match. Instead of saying, "Sorry I can't see you, old chap, but I have to run off to the tennis club," you must say, "But I have to work." This, I admit, is intensely difficult to say. Tennis is so much more urgent than the immortal soul. End of chapter 5. How to Live on 24 Hours a Day by Arnold Bennett. Chapter 6. Remember Human Nature. I have incidentally mentioned the vast expanse of 44 hours between leaving business at 2 p.m. on Saturday and returning to business at 10 a.m. on Monday. And here I must touch on the point whether the week should consist of 6 days or of 7. For many years, in fact until I was approaching 40, my own week consisted of 7 days. I was constantly being informed by older and wiser people that more work, more genuine living could be got out of 6 days than out of 7. And it is certainly true that now, with 1 day in 7 in which I follow no program and make no effort save what the caprice of the moment dictates, I appreciate intensely the moral value of a weekly rest. Nevertheless, had I my life to arrange over again, I would do again as I have done. Only those who have lived at the full stretch 7 days a week for a long time can appreciate the full beauty of a regular, recurring idleness. Moreover, I am aging, and it is a question of age. In cases of abounding youth and exceptional energy and desire for effort, I should say unhesitatingly, keep going day in, day out. But in the average case, I should say, confine your formal program, super program, I mean, to 6 days a week. If you find yourself wishing to extend it, but only in proportion to your wish, and count the time extra as a windfall, not as regular income, so that you can return to a 6-day program without the sensation of being poorer, of being a backslider. Let us now see where we stand. So far, we have marked for saving out of the waste of days half an hour at least on 6 mornings a week, and 1 hour and a half on 3 evenings a week. Total, 7 hours and a half a week. I propose to be content with that 7 hours and a half for the present. What? You cry. You pretend to show us how to live, and you only deal with 7 hours and a half out of 168? Are you going to perform a miracle with your 7 hours and a half? Well, not to mince the matter, I am, if you will kindly let me. That is to say, I'm going to ask you to attempt an experience which, while perfectly natural and explicable, has all the air of a miracle. My contention is that the full use of those 7.5 hours will quicken the whole life of the week, add zest to it, and increase the interest which you feel in even the most banal occupations. You practice physical exercises for a mere 10 minutes morning and evening, and yet you are not astonished when your physical health and strength are beneficially affected every hour of the day, and your whole physical outlook changed. Why should you be astonished that an average of over an hour a day given to the mind should permanently and completely enliven the whole activity of the mind? More time might assuredly be given to the cultivation of oneself, and in proportion as the time was longer, the results would be greater. But I prefer to begin with what looks like a trifling effort. It is not really a trifling effort, as those will discover who have yet to essay it. To clear even 7 hours and a half from the jungle is passably difficult, for some sacrifice has to be made. One may have spent one's time badly, but one did spend it. One did do something with it, however ill-advised that something may have been. To do something else means a change of habits. And habits are the very dickens to change. Further, any change, even a change for the better, is always accompanied by drawbacks and discomforts. If you imagine that you will be able to devote 7 hours and a half a week to serious, continuous effort, and still live your old life, you are mistaken. I repeat that some sacrifice and an immense deal of volition will be necessary. And it is because I know the difficulty, it is because I know the almost disastrous effect of failure in such an enterprise, that I earnestly advise a very humble beginning. You must safeguard your self-respect. Self-respect is at the root of all purposefulness, and a failure in an enterprise deliberately planned deals a desperate wound at one's self-respect. Hence I iterate and reiterate. Start quietly, unostentatiously. When you have conscientiously given 7 hours and a half a week to the cultivation of your vitality for 3 months, then you may begin to sing louder and tell yourself what wondrous things you are capable of doing. Before coming to the method of using the indicated hours, I have one final suggestion to make. That is, as regards the evenings, to allow much more than an hour and a half in which to do the work of an hour and a half. Remember the chance of accidents. Remember human nature, and give yourself, say, from 9 to 11:30 for your task of 90 minutes. End of chapter 6.
Like, comment, share, and subscribe to Beyond Belief Audiobook. Thank you so much.